Thank you very much for coming, and thank you all for being rockin' students who are serious about this and trying to do better for your classes. That's amazing, and I would say that you need to encourage your classmates to do the same thing. Okay, so this is really good. So my name is Joanna Cyrier, and I know you, but I don't know anybody, all my other students here, but I am the advisor for pre-physical therapy, for we don't have a pre-SLP program, but for the communicative disorders minor, and then also for pre-occupational therapy. Megan Roberts is back over here, and she is the advisor for imaging sciences or radiography, cardiopulmonary science, dental hygiene, and then Julie Mills is our other advisor, and she's our advisor for nutrition and foods. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we have some lovely professors who have taken their time, and we're so grateful for that, to come and share with you some tips about how to be successful in your classes. The classes that you have to take are very difficult, and they're very challenging, and that's a good thing. We don't want people out here who are, working on, your teeth who can't pass anatomy and physiology. That would be bad. Okay, we don't want physical therapists out here who can't get through a basic science class. We want people who are willing to step up to this challenge, but we do know it's difficult. We know that. And so these professors are here to help you. And what we're going to do is we're going to let them come up and talk a little bit about what study skills that they would impart to you, whether it be generalized or for their class. And then at the end, you have an opportunity to ask them questions. Okay, about studying, about what would be helpful, maybe what their experience may even be in regards to some of these classes, okay? So let's start with Dr. Brown. This is Dr. Patrick Brown, and he teaches human anatomy and human physiology through the health science department. And I can hand this out for you.
I'm keeping a cheat sheet just over there. It's so weird standing at a podium for 5 of you. Or standing at a podium, period. Those of you who know me, I have a hard time staying still. So I'll do my best. So I'm a bit of a teaching nerd. Like, I'm real into how people learn, and I have to pay attention to my time. Okay. So 4 tips, and these are coming to you. Now, I wrote this little document last year as... God, stay at the podium, Patrick. I wrote this little document last year as kind of something I will give to students who are like, I don't know what to do, I've never learned how to study, etc. So this might be some pretty basic stuff, but I'm going to sprinkle a little neuroscience in here, and hopefully it'll ring your bell. So first thing, this is a skill that a lot of people aren't taught anymore in high school because the way secondary ed has changed. This is just not a skill that's enforced, but it's self-assessment. Basically what that means is you should not have any guesses as to how you're going to perform on an assessment when you sit down to take that assessment, be it an exam, a quiz, write a paper, whatever. You should know how well you're going to do because you've self-assessed. So I think all of us give some sort of opportunity for you to check in and see how well you're doing. In my classes, I have little study guides that people can fill out and then try to do them again from memory. If I have something I want you to do that requires a little more mental muscle, I'll give you opportunities for practice. Now, I'm not going to force these things down your throat. None of us are, because this is university. But the point is, you should have some opportunity to gauge your learning. We call this formative assessment. So the specifics down here under number 1 are specific to the way I run my classroom, because I have a lot of weird little things I do. But by and large, if you're given some sort of class objectives, you should be able to meet those objectives on your own well before you sit down to take an assessment of some sort. So that's thing 1. One way to do that, before I move on, is get a study buddy. Find someone who is in the class with you who can quiz you, either formally or informally. My class, the anatomy portion of it, there's a lot of rote memory. Name this bone. What's this little squiggly looking thing on your brain? It has a name. It's probably in Latin. It probably doesn't make much sense. But you got to know these names, right? So if you can find somebody to help you with that self-assessment process, that's very nice. Thing 2, break it into pieces. Okay, the human brain, and I'll talk about this a couple of times, can hold 5 to 7 pieces of information at once in working memory. That means you can actively be thinking about and working with no more than 7 things at a time. Sometimes it can look like what you have to learn is Herculean. You have this mammoth amount of stuff to do. You have this big long list of terms that you have to learn, or you have all of these insano organic mechanisms that you have to learn. And these can seem really, really, really daunting. So break them into pieces. Don't work with more than your brain can handle at a time. Do 5. Once you've mastered those 5, then move on and do 5 more. Then do all 10. Okay? This is a process in education, we call it chunking. So we take it and we break it down into chunks, and eventually what happens is your brain learns to take each chunk as one thing. So for me, all 206 bones are a chunk that occupies one cognitive space in my brain. Okay, so you take it in small pieces and then turn those small chunks into larger chunks, right? And eventually you can step back and you can see the whole awesome R2-D2 instead of each individual Lego brick. I have a 9-year-old. We do lots of Lego analogies, okay? Tip 3, when you study. Remember that 5 to 7 rule? Don't make 5 of your 5 to 7 Twitter, Yik Yak, Instagram, the TV, and your tunes. Okay, you got to turn that stuff off. If you're going to learn something, especially something complex, then you have to focus on that thing you're learning. A lot of us think we're really good at multitasking, but the last 20 years of cognitive neuroscience have taught us none of us are. The human brain is terrible at multitasking. What you're doing is jumping from task to task to task. You're not multitasking. You're not doing a bunch of things at once. You're doing individual things in some sort of scattershot sequence that's not going to work well. Eliminate distraction. If you got to have music, make it music without words. Put your phone away. Now listen, I'm easily distractible. If you've been in my class, you know I bop around like a ferret on meth. Okay? I'm high energy. I'm all over the place. It's hard for me to sit and focus on anything but amazing survival games on the computer for more than just a few minutes. So I have to reward myself for my good behavior. Do that. Okay? Shut down your screens. Put your phone in another room. Do what you got to do. Maybe 10 minutes. If you can go for 10 minutes, that's awesome. Then reward yourself. Go check your Instagram feed, right? See what your girlfriend had for breakfast this morning, right? See how shiny your buddy's car got. Then put your phone away and go back, okay? So doing what you need to do and only that thing when you're supposed to be doing it, okay? If you're just writing a paper, I can't sit and write. I can't. I stink at it. But I have to write for a living. That's part of my job. As these women will tell you, we don't get paid unless we write. We have to write things. I'm terrible at it. It's no fun to me. So I will write for 20 minutes, a half hour, and then reward myself with a sweet YouTube video or something like that. And then I'll force myself to go back to writing again. But focus on your task at hand. The last thing, and this is one that all 4 of us would say, study as you go. That whole break it into pieces thing, that applies to time as well. So, and I may be preaching to the choir, I don't know. I was a terrible procrastinator as an undergraduate. It was really hard for me to keep up with things that I went. But what you'll find, if you don't do this already, is that you're going to have that one class that's going to kick you in the behind. For me, it was comparative vertebrate zoology. I thought I could just cram it up, learn everything I needed to the night before my first lab practical, and it absolutely kicked my tail. From then on, it was 2 or 3 hours every other day working on that one class. And I had to learn to budget my time. I had to learn to tell my friends no, which was really hard because I had some very persistent friends who wanted to do some very fun things. And I had to say no and budget my time and break things out bit by bit by bit. So, you guys are going to get the standard go to class every time. I hope I'm not stealing anybody's thunder. Don't skip class. Talk to your professors. Some of them are going to give, some folks are going to give very subject-specific advice. But in general, you need to study when it's time to study, not do anything else. Study in small pieces. Always go back and make sure you remembered the things you're studying or that you can do the thing you're supposed to do. We're not all just, hey, regurgitate some stuff for us. Right? We want you to be able to do complex things like synthesize information, evaluate things. And so make sure you can do that, self-assess. And finally, don't wait until the very end. Okay? Study as you go, bit by bit, little engine that could, and you'll be all right. Okay? So questions now or questions at the end? Or how we do that?
Probably questions at the end.
Okay, super. I'm going to peace out then.
Great.
You're
Thank you.
best.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Our next speaker is Dr. Susan Epps, and she teaches some of our allied health online courses.
So I'm talking about online. Like Dr. Brown said, these are not specific to any particular course. So what I will talk to you about is online in general. How many of you have had an online course already? Okay. So I may be preaching to the choir as well. You may already know this stuff. If you don't, then hopefully I'm telling you something that you can use in the future. One of the things that I noticed when I started teaching online, and I was thrown into online as an instructor. So it was, hey, here's 4 brand new to you classes, and you're going to teach all of them online, and you're going to do that next month. And I thought, oh my God, I'd barely been in D2L. So I know what it's like to be thrown in and you're trying to figure your way around this D2L thing, and it's brand new, and or if it's not brand new, it's a new course for you. And one of the things that I learned very quickly was online is not out of sight, out of mind. That may be what it ends up being, but that's not what it should be. And I've had students sitting in my office at the end of the semester saying, it was easy to remember to go to Dr. Brown's class or Dr. Foster's class because I had to be there, but with your class, I kind of forgot about it. With online, you do have to remember that you have the class. If that means setting a reminder in your phone to check, to log into D2L and check whether you have assignments or discussion boards, that's one of the suggestions that I've gotten from students. In fact, I poll my students every semester and say, what are your tips for success in online? Share with your classmates, because we may have people who are veterans of online instruction, and we have students who are brand new to online, who have never taken an online class before. That's one of the things they say. The students who have had online classes before, set a reminder in your phone. That smartphones can be wonderful things. Some faculty don't, they cringe if they see your phone out. But you can use that phone for good, and that's one of the things that you can use it for, is set a reminder every day, get in those online classes. In my classes in particular, and I think most of the faculty in our department, we expect you to be in the discussion boards. If you think you can wait till the end of the week, whatever the end of the week is, and do one post, or do your post and then say, I agree, or I like that post, I like what you said, and think you're done, you're probably not going to do very well in discussions. If faculty are just counting responses, that may be acceptable, but for me, that's not engagement in the class, and it wouldn't be sufficient if you were sitting in an in-person class, and you probably wouldn't even say, raise your hand to go, oh yeah, I agree, but people don't think anything about doing that in the online courses. That's not a response. That's, you could give a thumbs up sitting in class for that. So put time into the discussions. That's how you're going to put a lot of your learning and engagement together, is in those discussion boards. That takes the place of a class discussion. The way I teach my in-person classes, there's a lot of discussion, and I do my online classes the same way. I think Dr. Brown has a lot of active engagement. You can't just sit back and hide in the back of a room. The same way with online, because I know how many times you've been in the discussion boards, and I know what your posts are because I can go back and read them. I may not remember exactly what you said in class, but in online, there's a record of everything you say. So I can go back and look at that. But being engaged in the discussion, and this comes from students too, it's amazing how much you can learn from your classmates if you will get in there and read what your classmates have posted, engage in the discussion. I'll be in there doing the discussion boards with you, and I like to be challenged. That's one thing I would tell you, and again, I'm speaking specifically for me, but in general, challenge things. You can do that in a positive way. Well, you said this, but I'm not sure I agree with this because here's a source that says something else. When you bring in other readings other than your text or whatever you were assigned, it may be a video. If you bring in other references, that's great because those are ways that you're engaged in the course. And with online, if you think that it's an independent study that you can complete in a weekend, you may be able to do a class that way, but I would argue that's probably not a very good class for you because I don't know how much you're going to learn if you just flew through some tests in a Saturday and Sunday and you were done. I hope I'm not insulting anybody in the room by saying that. But when I first started teaching online and students would go, oh my gosh, this class takes so much time. Well, yes, it does. Online does take time. It's a little easier in some ways to go sit in class where you know you have, okay, watching the time, I've got 55 minutes today, and I've got 55 minutes on Wednesday, and I've got 55 minutes on Friday. And I'm out of class. And it doesn't mean that you stop doing things. You do all the things that Dr. Brown talked about outside of class. Same thing with online. When you're in the course, that's being in class. And I think sometimes students assume that online is independent study. You can do it whenever you want to. And if that means you're doing everything on Sunday night, that's probably not going to work. And I would tell you, in my classes in particular, that's not going to work. At least not for long. Other tips for success in online, and again, this is coming from students, and I get it's amazing how consistent their comments are every semester. It's like, have y'all been talking to each other? Because these come up repeatedly. In addition to the using your phone for good, know what's expected of you. Print out that schedule, print out the syllabus, print out whatever it is you get from the instructor that tells you what you need to be doing, because if in online it's out of sight, out of mind, you're going to forget that you have something due. So print out the schedule, make sure that you're following along with it, and treat this like you would any other class. It's not something you do on a weekend. You don't just open up your schedule and go, oh yeah, I got to turn that in by 11 o'clock tonight, and whoo, here it is 10:30. I guess I better get going. Online classes are going to be time consuming, so be prepared for that. Trying to think what else, the biggies. There's some individual things that come up. For those of you that get into one of the allied health programs where you're on clinicals, you're going to be in your clinical site possibly all day long. That's a little different than when you're used to going to class and you've got a break in between. You may have lunch. If you're at a clinical site, you're there at the time they tell you need to be there. But that doesn't mean you're done if you're still taking online classes. You may have to go home and be online at night. You may have to get up early in the morning and be online. And one of the things the students have cautioned about is make sure you're not assuming that you can use time in the clinic to be on the computer. You probably can't. So if you think you're going to, I can just do that on my lunch break, sometimes you're blocked out of logging into the D2L site from clinical site. So that may seem like a silly thing, but as you're planning your time, you need to plan time away from your other responsibilities to get into the D2L site. I don't want you sitting in any of their classes, logging into your online classes, trying to do work for online while you're in another class. It's a separate class. So plan your time that way. Speaking of planning your time, that is another thing that students have said usually trips them up with online. They don't plan the extra time that it takes to read the discussions. I'm used to typing. If I were standing up here, I could probably type this way better than I'm speaking. For the last 6 years, I've done nothing but teach online. I don't talk to people, I type to people. So as you're typing, it's one thing to talk in class, and what you say, you can stop and go, wait a minute, let me rephrase that. That didn't come out right. But in online, as you're typing, you do have the opportunity to edit. Use that opportunity so that whatever you're typing in your discussions makes sense. You don't have to post your stream of conscious thought. If I go back and listen to this, I'm going to be going, I need to edit that a lot, because that's not what I would be. I might have typed all that out and then I would have gone back and copied and pasted and edited. And you can do that in online, which is great. And take that opportunity to do that, because you're spell check and do all those things you would do if you were typing a paper. You can spell check in the discussion boards. A lot of students don't realize that. But you can spell check. I would highly recommend that you do that. It makes things a whole lot easier to read when we're trying to figure out what you're saying. Another thing with the online courses, particularly in the allied health area, the core courses in allied health that you're going to be taking, you will be in class with students from other disciplines. And it is wonderful to learn what other students experience, what they're doing. Treat these classes the same way you would sitting in here in person. If this were a class, before class, we'd probably all go, okay, so what'd y'all do this weekend? you can do that in online, develop relationships with your online classmates, talk to each other, whether that's sending emails or if somebody says something and you want to follow up on it, shoot them an email or ask them something on an open discussion board so you can get to know each other. Sometimes that's what the students have said is the neatest thing about online is they're able to connect with people they might not have connected with in class, because if you two are sitting next to each other, you may be the only people you have a conversation with. There's an empty seat there. There's nobody to talk to. But in online, you can actually talk to everybody in the class, and I think that's one of the coolest things. Everybody has a voice, so use it and take advantage of that. I was actually hoping there would be more questions than me talking, so I'm going to sit down now, and I will be more than happy to field questions about online, because I think I can probably do a better job answering what questions you have than just telling you stuff that you may go, I already know this. So I will turn it over to Dr. Eagle at this point.
Dr. Eagle, this is Dr. Cassandra Eagle, and she is the chair of the Department of Chemistry.
Well, good afternoon. It's my honor to be the chair of the Department of Chemistry, and I'm going to share with you 8 things, which I'm afraid goes over the limit that Dr. Brown said you could remember. So I'll review them a couple of times, and some of them you already know. So, but the first is, if you're taking a general chemistry class, that could be 1030, chemistry 1110, or chemistry 1120, buy a scientific non-programmable calculator with an EXP or an EE key and learn how to use it. I'm going to say that 3 times. Buy a scientific non-programmable calculator with an EXP or an EE key and learn how to use it. 3rd time. Buy a scientific non-programmable calculator with an EXP or EE key and learn how to use it. If you have trouble learning how to use it, go to your professor or read the little packet insert that comes with the calculator. They always have one that comes with the calculator, and all of them have an online site as well. Why do you need to know that? Virtually everything you do in general chemistry is based on problem solving. So if you don't know how to solve those problems, you're not going to be able to make it in that class. And virtually all of the problems require some sort of scientific notation. And scientific notation requires using a non-programmable scientific calculator with an EXP or EE key that you know how to use. Okay, so that was number 1. And that may be unique to the group here that's going to be talking to you. The 7 others, some make perfectly good sense. Go to class. You may say, well, class is boring. The professor is using PowerPoint presentations, and the PowerPoint presentations are posted. Yes, but in class you can stop the professor in real time and ask questions. And the problems are worked out on those PowerPoints. So you can follow along and see if you're making those same transitions there. So that was number 1, go to class. Number 2, work out all the examples the professor does in class. If the professor is doing those examples in class, they may be homework examples, they may be test examples. Let's see, so I guess that was number 3, because number 2 is go to class, sorry about that. Number 4, do your homework independently and get to a place where you can do the homework independently if you can't do it automatically. Number 5, ask your instructors for help if you don't know how to do something. Now, with chemistry, it's very difficult for an instructor to show you how to do a problem through email because that problem requires calculations. So that typically means you need to attend office hours. Sometimes if the faculty is really in tune, you can write out how you're doing it and maybe send that as a scanned picture, but most of the time it means you need to see that professor face to face. Sometimes that means coming before class or after class if you cannot physically attend office hours. Number 6, and this takes up with something Dr. Brown said, please don't try to multitask in class. It's very difficult to Facebook and pay attention to the professor. Sometimes the Facebook is going to win because that's more interesting to you. Number 7, before you come to class, review the lecture notes from the last class so you know where you are. And number 8, right before class, review the notes again. So let me go through all 8 of those things one more time. So first, buy a scientific calculator that's non-programmable with an EXP or EE key. Go to class. Work all examples that are worked in class on your own. Make sure you can do your homework independently or get to a place where you can do it independently. And that means, number 5, ask your instructors for help, which may mean attending office hours. Number 6, don't multitask in class. It typically does not work. Number 7, right before class, review your last lecture notes, and right after class, review your lecture notes. And I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards. Thank you.
All right, our next presenter is Dr. Saroyan Foster, and she is the primary professor for Biology 1 and 2.
So, the only professor. So you have no choice. The only professor for Bio 1, and we have a separate professor for Bio 2.
Okay.
So, I kind of ditto everything that's been said so far, and I'm going to specifically talk about reading. You've probably learned about reading is fundamental. It was like a commercial or something about that back in the day. But really talk about reading, because no matter what class you take, there will be assigned readings. And one of the things that I get from my students is that, oh my goodness, it's so much information. It's like 40 pages to read. And I say, yeah, it is. And then I find that students get so bogged down in trying to read every single letter, word, sentence on all 40 pages, and they're reading for like 20 hours. And then after they're done, they don't remember anything that they've read. And so I do focus a lot in class about reading, not just reading the textbook, but reading scientific papers or reading test questions. How do I even read test questions and then be able to understand what the question is asking? So if you can't get through your reading, you're going to have a difficult college career no matter what class you take. And I teach to students something called an SQ3R. I learned this in high school, and I grumbled at my chemistry professor when he made us do these, and I was like, why do we have to do this? But now he would be thrilled to know that I use it now in class. And so the SQ3, and it's been modified over the years, but it's simply, survey, which is the S, the Q is ask questions, and then the 3R is sort of read, review, and recite. And so when I tell my students the survey part is that don't just open the textbook and read it like a novel. Specifically, I know for the science courses, when you're reading those textbooks, you're looking for information because you're going to do something with it. And so you're not just kind of reading for fun. And so I tell the students to, one, open the chapter. And typically at the beginning of the chapter, many of the chapters will have learning objectives. Even in some of the social science courses, I'm sure they'll have, one, a title of the chapter, and then they'll have some learning objectives. And then as you go through the chapter, they'll be broken up into maybe 5.1, section 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, so forth and so on. And you want to take note of what those headings are. And so do a quick survey. And what's the title of the chapter, first of all? Look at the subsections, 5.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. See what those titles are. And then even within a section, see what those topics are. So now you're surveying and you got an idea of where am I going, or what do I have to look out for as I'm reading through this particular chapter. And then after that, the next one is question. And so I easily tell the students, take those titles and turn them into a question, because again, you want to actively engage. You're reading for answers. And so after you read something, you want to be able to describe what you've read. You don't want to get all the way through to the end of the chapter and you've been sitting there 5 hours and you cannot describe anything. And so as we heard, take things in chunks. So you take the titles and you turn them into a question. So if the title of a chapter is, passive transport does blah, blah, blah. What is passive transport, or how does passive transport do blah, blah, blah? A very simple question, but you'll be surprised that after you're finished reading, you can't answer that if you're not actively engaging the material. So develop questions. The other way that I tell the students to do questions, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, but once you actually start reading and you get through just maybe 2 paragraphs, stop there and then make questions about what you've just read. Maybe make some notations on the sideline. You don't want to highlight the whole page, and you also don't want to rewrite the whole page either. So if you read small bits, or if you make questions about a small section, you're answering those questions, so you're not rewriting the whole chapter and you're not highlighting the whole chapter, but you're answering questions about a specific amount of information that you've just read, and you're more likely to read it. So survey, look at all the title headings, then ask questions. Just turn those title questions into some simple who, what, where, who, what, when, and where type of questions. And then we come into the survey, S, the Q, and the 3 R's. Now you're ready to read. So again, reading is not the first thing you do. You survey, you ask some questions, and then you come in and now you're ready to read. And so as you're reading, you take it in small chunks, and you should be able to at least give some bullet points, make some annotations on the side, ask questions about small pieces of the chapter or that section that you've just read before you move on. Because in doing that, you'll find that what you're going to do is you're going to anticipate what's going to come next. And if you're anticipating what you're reading, then you're more likely to remember some of the things that you've read. So you survey, you question, you read, and then you review. And so you read that small section, and the reviewing, of course, is as you review, you can make little bullet points, but you can also answer any kinds of questions that you have made at the very beginning. And then the recite part is, again, recite what you know. And I tell my students, you have to be able to communicate to me what you know verbally. You should be able to verbally communicate what you know. And so if you live by yourself, you got to talk to yourself. If you don't, maybe you might get your roommate. But whatever it is, you want to be able to communicate what you know. And I tell the students verbally, you want to be able to verbally communicate what you know and what you've read. And the other thing when you're reading through the chapter is to pay attention to the figures. I tell the students all the time, this figure right here, I could easily turn into a test question. You don't even have to read the book. And they look at me like I'm crazy when I say that. But it's true. I can take a figure, and then right below the figures is going to be what? A figure legend. And so I stress this because I make my students do lab reports or research papers, and you have to write a figure, create a figure with a legend. But it's very important to look at that figure legend, because that figure legend, one, summarizes and discusses the figure, but two, it's going to summarize some key concepts that are within the chapter. And so again, that can save you some time, but you can get really good nuggets of information by reading the figure and then looking at the figure legend. But you also want to be able to describe the figure, recreate the figure. I used to give an assignment where students hated it, but I would tell them, draw me a figure and write something about it, or create your own legend, and I'll give you points. And they, this is so time consuming. But they found that after they did that, and I think it was just more challenging to the students because you guys don't like to get things wrong. But it's okay to be wrong and learn from your mistakes. But take a look at the figure legends or the tables or any kind of diagrams that you see in the textbook, and then be able to recreate those yourself. Because again, you're actively engaging in that particular material. And I even tell the students, sometimes you can even go to those figures and those legends first to get kind of a big overview before you're reading. And if you have instructors that give you study guides or lecture guides or some kind of guide, you can actually use those to direct your reading throughout the chapter, and you can realize that you can get through a chapter quicker, but you also retain the information better, and then that reduces the time you have to keep going back over the information. And then when you're taking exams, you do the same thing. I give questions where there are like paragraphs of information sometimes, and so you have to be able to read through that and underline and circle and be able to annotate that paragraph. And I tell students, take it sentence by sentence if you have to, but you should leave that paragraph knowing some of the key things that are in that paragraph and how that relates to the question. And then when you get to the answer choices, you should be able to look at those answer choices and direct, how does this relate back to the question? And if this answer choice has nothing to do with what I taught in class, people would choose the answer. I'm like, I didn't even talk about that. That's not even in the chapter. And so you can automatically cross that out. But then two, if you have answer choices that are the same, you've got to be able to read those two choices and ask yourself, I mean, literally ask yourself, you probably can't do it out loud during the test, but mentally say, how are these two answers different and how are they the same? But you got to distinguish them from one another because only one is right. And I think once you do that and you engage in those answer choices, then the light bulbs will start to go off. And I also tell the students that when you see a question, and there are going to be keywords in the question, and you have to ask yourself, how does this relate to what I've learned in the chapter? And you have to kind of go back and kind of create a mental map of where is this information coming from. But if you've mapped out your chapter or your study materials, you know where this particular question belongs, and you can begin to jog your memory. And the last thing, I don't have a teaching board really, but I work on my students with concept maps. And I have a video of this on I think it's like ETSU online, where they put all the videos about how to just create a concept map. But I tell my students, if there's a major topic, you start with that major topic, and then you begin to do subtopics. Then you move over here and take that subtopic, and you break it down even more. But that even helps the students, because I even tell them that, okay, if this is a subtopic, and you have all the little headings under the subtopic, and I'm asking a question about this subtopic, all the material you need are going to be on this side of your diagram. So something way, way, way over there may not even relate, and you can kind of mentally map how your information is grouped together. We did something about chemical bonds today. You guys may have not had it, but we talked about 3 types of chemical bonds, and we've separated them. And I said, all this information belongs to this type of bond over here. Doesn't belong over here or over there. It belongs to this information here. Then what we can do is say, okay, well, if they do relate, what would be the merging point of how all these different types of bonds relate, and what do they have in common? And then, of course, we've separated them about how they're different. So again, trying to create a mental map of the information that you're learning so that you can better relate it. And again, having those figures and recreating those figures and those diagrams, and maybe that's how I learn, but I can kind of close my eyes and visualize where I've placed things and where things go together. So if I'm not quite sure, at least I could probably eliminate some of the choices, because you know that this absolutely does not belong because it was way over there in my mind, or way over there on that particular side. And I'd be happy to answer any more questions for that.
Okay. Turn that down here. Okay. All right. So students, helpful? Good tips? Yes? Okay. So this is an opportunity for you to ask questions. Okay. Be aware this is a really cool opportunity because, number one, all of these folks teach very, very giant classes. So considering that there are a small number of you here, this is a really cool opportunity for you to be able to ask questions that you might not be able to ask in a giant class. Okay, so who has questions? I'm going to pick on you if you don't. Yes, sir. I'm going to repeat the question because since we're taping this today, I want to make sure that the folks who can hear this online can also hear your question. Okay?
Sure, no problem. My question would be directed towards Dr. Brown. Specifically for things like labs and practical application, what are some options or opportunities students can use when labs are not available to them during overlapping class periods or work hours, etc.?
Okay, so do you want to repeat that, or you want me to repeat it?
Go ahead.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that I have your question correct. So the question is, when labs are not available due to overlaps or scheduling issues, how do students kind of work with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great.
Okay. So, and Drs. Eagle and Foster might have something else to add to what I will say. But so at least in health sciences, we have some open study times for labs, because you're right, you can't learn the parts of the skull without a skull in front of you. I have some who try, and it doesn't work out very well. In my case, it was a cat. You can't really learn about, sorry, Susan, the innards of a cat without cutting up the cat and learning about its innards. So if you can't make it to that, there are some things available to you on campus. The library has resources. Their hours are much more extended. So, and as far as anatomy goes, we have at least one of almost everything we teach on in the laboratory available in the library for checkout. We also, many of us utilize online learning systems, and I think that's probably one of the biggest changes that's occurred over the last several years. The textbook my students use, the textbook that's used in Gen Micro, I bet you the Gen Bio textbook has an access code with it for an online learning system. And even if your instructor doesn't use that, you paid for it. Go ahead and get into the online learning system. I use one called Mastering A&P. There's a Mastering Chemistry, there's a Mastering Biology. It's Pearson's thing. McGraw-Hill's a different book publisher. They have a different thing. But in almost all of these that I've looked at, there is some place where it says study area, or my study, or my biology study guide, or whatever. And when you go in there, a lot of times what you'll see, especially for hands-on lab stuff, is virtual labs. So I know the McGraw-Hill micro book I used to use had virtual labs with it. My A&P stuff has virtual labs for everything. So I had a discussion with a woman this morning who, because of her work obligations, can't get into the study hall times we have for lab during the day. And so she's going to be relying heavily on these online tools. So you pay and I'm going to use nice language to Curry, you pay a ton, notice I left out the adjective, a ton of money for these books in many instances. I know the book we use in anatomy and physiology, if you buy it brand new, is over $300. So you're paying for the, I know.
I'm sorry.
I know, it's a mess. But part of what you're paying for is all of these programmers and all of these educators who created this online content for you. So I employ it heavily in my classes. I have colleagues who don't, but we make their students aware of it so that if they do need that out of classroom help. So the other thing I can highly encourage you to do is, it's like Dr. Eagle said, talk to us. Okay? I don't bite hard. So, if you have a situation, I mean, things are so different now from when we were in school. I mean, for us, school was our job, right? The rule was ladies, for every hour you spend in class, you should spend 2. I've heard anywhere from 1 to 4. 1 to 4 hours outside of class working on that thing. So if you're taking 20 hours, then you should spend, I took 20 hours my junior year. Yeah, it was insane. It was all biology classes with labs. I didn't have much of a life. So that's what happens when you're a giant nerd and don't have a girlfriend. You can do that. But let's say you're taking 12 hours, right? That's 48 hours a week outside of class you should be spending studying max. That's insane, right? But you guys have jobs now. Some of you are supporting yourselves. Some of you are still supporting your family and going to school full time. This is a real thing. We know this. Okay, we've been in higher education in one form or another for the last many years. So we've seen this transition take place. We know this is a thing. So tell us, because if we're not using the online thing in our class, we probably know it exists, and we can probably hook you up with it. If it's a real difficult situation and you really need to borrow some bones and take them home and look at them, that might be able to be worked out. So if there is no structured way to accommodate you, it can't hurt at all to ask your instructor, what do I need to do? This is what my schedule is. I have a family. I work second shift. The only hours I have that I'm conscious during the day, I'm in class. How can I do this? And we will usually try to find some way to make you successful. That's our job. Right? Our job is to provide you with the tools you need to be successful. Did that answer your question? I ramble.
Yeah, there's a couple options there. So.
Okay. Y'all have anything else to? Because you teach different lab stuff than I do.
But the same thing,
Pick some bones.
we have the labs open available too, and you can have something worked out if you need to view the labs.
Unfortunately, chemistry does not have the labs because you can't take the acids and bases and the explosive chemicals home. We frown on that, and OSHA definitely frowns on that. There are some of the lab virtual labs in the software that you purchase when you purchase the textbook that you can use to get an idea of how this is added to that. But there's nothing that can compensate for actually physically doing it. Now, if the other thing you're thinking about is some step-by-step instruction on how to do a particular chemistry problem, the software that you purchase when you purchase the online homework does have office hours that you can click on, and it will show you how to do problems. And it even has a little person's hand talking through how to solve the problem. So that's useful to have.
Okay, so what other questions can we answer for you all? All right, well, I actually have one that I know some of you may be thinking but are not going to say, so I'll go ahead and ask it. We have a lot of students who do great in lab and struggle in lecture. Are there any tips that any of you might be willing or have that might shed some light on that issue? Because I know even though some of our students may not be asking that question, so many of them come in with that same issue every semester. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, one thing too, I know I can speak for biology. Our labs are taught by teaching assistants, but that doesn't mean that the teaching, there's a huge difference. But when I think of labs, and I tell my students, 25% of your grade from lab, I mean, that's work that you can do at home. And so you're writing papers, and we do have a lab practical in class, but for biology lab, a lot of your assignments that you're going to do will be the writing portion of you synthesizing and pulling together what you've done in terms of your lab. So you can do that at home. And what I find with students and where they struggle with the lecture portion when it comes to the exams, it's the reading. It's the reading. It's being able to read the questions, or read the material, read the questions, and then be able to think through without I don't do note cards or any of that. So it's all up in here. So being able to do that without any crutch or any aid, but when you're at home and you're doing the labs and you're writing the lab reports, it's different. And then, of course, writing a paper is different than sitting down taking multiple choice items. And for my class, I can specifically say everything is multiple choice because it's over about 550 people this semester. So all the exams are multiple choice. So it's a different type of test taking that as a student, you have to learn that it's different taking multiple choice tests, standardized questions, if that's the case, versus writing a paper. And that's even the difference where you say, well, I'm doing all A's in my history course and my English course, but when it comes to my science courses, I do poorly. Because the assessments are different, and you have to learn how to be great at all different types of assessments, or learn what's being asked of me. I didn't talk about this, but I do teach my students about Bloom's taxonomy when I'm asking test questions, and even trying to understand that. They say everything is application, and I'll say no, it's not. You're not understanding what's an application type of question versus just a basic knowledge type of question. And so understanding, or knowing rather, what's being required of you, and then how do I approach that task differently, that you can't approach multiple choice questions the same way you would if you're writing a paper or even writing an essay. You really have to be able to understand, how do I attack? And I find that students do struggle in attacking multiple choice questions. And some may struggle with the essay questions and, how much do I write? Did I give a complete answer or not? And so for those that probably do those essay questions, Mike can even elaborate on if they see how students struggle with doing essay questions versus doing the multiple choice questions. But that's sort of the difference that I see, is the task is different, and students can do better on one task versus the other. One, because it's at home versus being in class.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
One of the things I'll say, that I don't teach a lab class, so this has nothing to do with lab, but it ties in with what Dr. Foster said about the essay part of a test in any course. One of the things that I've noticed over the years, and even my graduate students do this, and it's something that I had to teach myself. I was an English major in undergrad. I did a lot of reading and a lot of writing. And when I read the papers that I wrote as a freshman, I cringe because I see just how poorly I wrote. And grammatically, I was spot on. I had no problems with grammar. My problem was digging deeper in the essay part. And so what I tell my students now, because I've noticed, I went back and I read every paper I wrote my freshman year, and I could see exactly why I got all those C's, because I wasn't following through with complete thoughts. Had complete sentences, but they weren't complete thoughts. And I think and I noticed that in writing that students do in my classes and their essays, that it's one thing, and one of the classes I teach is leadership, and it's great to say it's very important for organizations to have strong leadership. That sounds awesome. But what exactly does that mean? If you don't explain why it's important and what exactly is good leadership, you need to go beyond that surface statement. And I tell my graduate students when they get to their comps, if they give surface answers, they're not going to pass. And I think the same thing applies even to the undergrads. If you give a surface answer like that, you're not going to do well. You've got to have dug deeper into the material, and it's not, and I can't use a biology example because I can't think of one off the top of my head, but that would be something I would say with your essays is at the end of every sentence, ask how, why, so what. If you're not answering those questions, you haven't provided a thorough response. And I think when you do a multiple choice test, you don't have to worry about that. But if you have essay tests in your lecture classes, that's something that could really benefit when you go back and you read your response. If somebody who reads that, what you have written, doesn't know anything about that topic, would they have a better idea after they've read your response? Would I know something more about biology or chemistry or anatomy and physiology or patient education or whatever it is based on your response? Did you give me more? What comes beyond that? What does good leadership look like? Why is it important? Asking the how, the why, the so what, and then making sure you answer that can really go a long way. And that's something that I think you have to learn by practice. It doesn't come naturally. It certainly didn't for me, and I was an English major. I thought I knew that stuff, but when I went back and read it over again, I can honestly say that's what I had to learn, was to follow through on my thoughts. So I was giving full and complete thoughts and not just complete sentences.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you all for coming. We are running out of time. Before everyone leaves, though, I do want to mention we have Deidre here from the Center for Academic Achievement, and I know that all of our professors, I'm sure, have referred students to the CFAA, so I just want you all to be aware of the CFAA if you don't know already. So, Deidre, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, absolutely. I think everyone has a handout somewhere in their pile that describes who we are and what we do, and I won't repeat all the wonderful advice that you've heard today, but I hope that you remember it. Just know that we have tutors over in the CFAA for writing, which is a big part. We see a lot of Dr. Epps students, actually. We have it for math, which is a high demand subject. We have it for science. So we have something that you can rely on during your time here at ETSU to help. Has anyone ever been to a tutoring appointment? You look familiar, I thought. A couple of you, great. So please take advantage of that. This semester we're starting a new program, supplemental instruction, that we're doing with Dr. Foster actually in her Biology 1 courses, where an SI leader actually goes to the class and then conducts 2 study and review sessions every week for that. So if any of you instructors are interested in that for your classes in the spring, just contact us and let us know. We'll be happy to set it up, and it's a really great help for everybody. It's free, which is the best part, so why not take advantage of it? All right, so if anyone's had any questions about that, please just stop by. First floor of the library beside the bagel shop. It's kind of hard to miss. So we'd be happy to help you, and just know we're there for you. We can help you with these study skills that they've talked about. We can help you make a study plan. We can help identify what your issues are. You may not even know why you're struggling in classes, and we can look at what you're doing and help show you what to do better. So it's a great opportunity for some one-on-one attention that you can't maybe get in other places. So if anyone has any questions, I'll hang around for a few minutes. You can stop by and ask me, okay? All right, thank you.
Okay, so students, let's all say thank you and give some applause to our professors and to Deidre today. Thank you for coming out and sharing this information with us today. If you all have any questions, please, let us know. Make sure if you didn't sign in, just to sign in before you leave. And thank you all for coming very much, and spread the word about this to your classmates. I think this is the first time that this college has ever really had a whole lot of these kinds of things, so people don't know what they are. So if you have classmates, spread the word around, let them know this is the kind of stuff that's going to be happening, because we want our college to have some of the best students, if not the best students, on campus, and that we want you all to be successful in your programs, whatever you all end up doing. Okay? All right, great. Thank you all for coming, and thank you again.